Welcome to the Our Community Listens podcast, where we strengthen relationships and build stronger communities through listening, leadership, care, and service. Learn and partner with us as we imagine a society in which people care about each other first. Explore more at ourcommunitylistens.org. Hi everyone, I'm Adam Solgett, and today's episode is a conversation between Mike Disparis, Teresa Vineyard, and Dr. Gary Morris from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. The relationship between St. Edward's University and Our Community Listens is an interesting one. As you listen to the podcast, you'll learn more about the university and what makes them unique when it comes to communication curriculum. You'll also learn how they have dealt with students during these difficult times, and how they are using this very podcast to continue connection and increase the importance of listening.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Excited to be back today. Today we have an exciting guest for Teresa and I to talk with. He is Dr. Gary Morris from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. Gary, how are you today?
Doing great. The weather's wonderful outside. I enjoyed a nice walk to my office so I could have a quiet space to chat with you all today.
I love how you live close enough to your office in Austin, Texas. I can just imagine what it's like down there with the weather and the leaves changing and you getting to walk over there. So Teresa, I'm going to ask you, since you're in St. Louis, how are you and how's the weather up there?
Well, the weather here is great this week. Yesterday it was only a high of 50. Today is the high of 70 to 75. And it's a little breezy out, a warm breeze. So it's beautiful. Love it.
Oh man, it sounds like everybody's having a good early November day. So let's go ahead and get started on our conversation, Gary. We're so excited to have you here today. Can you give us a little background on St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, what the college kind of looks like, and what are some of your goals for the college?
Yeah, so St. Edward's University was founded in the late 1800s by Father Sorin, who is the same priest who founded Notre Dame, which is a school many listeners probably know. So we are a Holy Cross school, which means that's an order of the Catholic Church that has certain values that it promotes. And in the education area, that means meeting students where they are, educating the whole person, not sacrificing the heart at the expense of the mind, creating a community that's welcoming to all, and the courage to take measured risks. So it's a great place for students to come and learn from all over the world. It's a very diverse campus. We're over 50% students from underrepresented populations. And we're also economically diverse. So more than 40% of our students are Pell eligible, which means they come from economically the most needy families in the United States. So it's a great diverse environment for learning. We've got about 3,000 undergraduate students here, and we primarily focus on the liberal arts. But we've got great STEM programs and business programs, and it's just a wonderful place to teach and learn.
And one of my favorite things about St. Edward's, Gary, you had me out there as a guest about a year ago, was the fact of where you sit in Austin and the school mascot, right? The Hilltoppers, because you overlook the city of Austin. Is just absolutely beautiful, not just in the day, but at night as well, too. So not only an amazing campus to be at for the physical scenes, but a really cool place to get an education as well.
Yeah, I think we've got the greatest view of downtown Austin skyline anywhere in the city. We're on some high ground, so my hike up the hill to the office is 100 feet uphill. And so in a flat area that is East Texas, we're right at the edge of the hill country, so we start getting some hills in the area, and we're on the top of the highest hill in South Austin. So we've got a great view of downtown, and and another institution of higher education that sits on the other side of the river that people may know a little bit about. Their mascots, the Longhorns. Ours are the Hilltoppers, which is a goat.
Very well described as well too. So Gary, talk about the beginning of how OCL, our community listens in St. Edwards. It's a fascinating story. Got its start, not just for a connection, but that led to a national partnership with y'all.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Mike. I was attending a conference called Texas DigiCon at Austin Community College, which is a large community college system here in the Austin area. And the keynote speaker at that conference was John Gardner, who founded and runs the Gardner Institute, which is a nonprofit that has been looking at and studying ways to improve student retention and success in higher education for a number of years. And John finished his keynote, which was very inspirational. He talked about his own experience in college and his tough start, but how he recovered and graduated and went on to a very successful career, and his reflection on how not all the students get the kind of supports that he got. And that really helped shape his career going forward. And he finished that talk, and then it was time for dinner, and I happened to be at one of the front tables, and he sat down next to me. And he saw my name badge, and my name badge had St. Edward's University on it. And he had been on our campus, and he knew of our campus. And he said, St. Edward's University, he said, you know, you're one of only a half a dozen or so institutions of higher education that teach listening as a college course.
Wow.
And so he was very interested in our campus because we teach listening skills as part of our curriculum. And he said, you know, I just met this leader from an organization that you all need to be in touch with. So it was Rebecca Buell, and he had just met her, and she had just assumed the leadership at our community listen. He said, you all need to talk. And he put us in touch with one another, and we started talking. This is December 2018. And Rebecca and I went back and forth a few times brainstorming some ideas. And finally, in October 2019, I got to take the 3-day communication skills training class in St. Louis. And wow, that was so impactful. It just blew me away.
What was impactful about it to you based on how you were thinking to apply it to your job?
Well, you know, I think we all recognize that communication is a challenge from personal life to professional life. It's probably the most commonly named organizational challenge by employees, as everyone feels like they're in the dark sometimes, and how can we improve communication? And we certainly had our challenges on our own campus with issues that were of concern to our faculty and our students and our administration. And we live in a very diverse community in Austin, where there's a lot of political issues that are in the air as the state capital. We have a lot of politics always going on in the community, and a tension between local and state level politics. And so just sort of observing what was going on our campus, in our community, in our nation, it really inspired me to want to learn more about listening and how we could improve relationships and the function of our organizations and the well-being of our families. And that's what hit me about that 3-day course. As I walked away, and I think everyone walks away realizing I wasn't as good of a listener as I thought I was.
That's true, Dr. Morris.
Gary, I think about the first time Rebecca called me, and I just started working at OCL in the education department, and she told me about you, and she said, he's from St. Edward's University. I had no idea during our conversation, and I was making a big jump on assumption that you didn't work in the communication department. So when I found out that you were a professor of environmental science and physics, I was just like, whoa,
Wow.
this is really, really cool, because here's a guy who is a professor at a university teaching all the cool sciences that I always struggled in, but finding ways to better communicate, not only in his teaching style, but to reach kids. And when I got to come out there last December to do a bit of a listening session, a pre-session with your folks out there, I was so amazed at your stories of connections with your actual students, besides just what you have learned with OCL, but then also to take those skill sets to work with your kids. Can you talk a little bit about that with the students that you have, the student body at St. Edward's, and the importance, not just at that point in time in December, but knowing that we had a really big pandemic in March and the world kind of just went a little bit crazy. How have you used those skills to support your kiddos virtually, sometimes on the phone, sometimes in person? Because that's an important part as them being young adults, right?
Yeah, we're very fortunate and blessed here at St. Edward's to have an amazing student population. And I think to a person on this campus, all of us who have the privilege of interacting with and teaching these students recognize what a blessing it is. They are dedicated, they are hardworking, they care, they're passionate, they're engaged. And they have a depth of understanding of the world around them and a sense for how to engage with that world that is truly inspiring. I think probably not a day goes by where we don't learn from them. And as the pandemic arrived in March, everyone on this campus sort of rallied and reoriented their approach to teaching and learning. We went completely online after spring break in the middle of March. So before spring break, we were meeting in person, and then after spring break, nobody came back to campus. And so transitioning from the in-person, highly engaged, in the same room kind of connection with our students to this new mode where we're looking at folks in Zoom boxes and trying to stay engaged and connected and to listen to one another. I think we all had to pick up a whole new set of skills, but I would say, based on my experience, that listening's at the forefront of that. Being able to hear the feedback from the students, being able to hear their stories and how they were adjusting to very difficult circumstances. I can only imagine what that experience must be like for a student in college trying to learn the second half of a class entirely online.
So Gary, talk to us a little bit about, you went through facilitator training, you applied to become a national partner, and then the pandemic hit. And we haven't been able to have classes at St. Edward's for in-person because of all the restrictions in Austin and just trying to get people together. What have you done in the interim to continue growing skill sets at St. Ed's? Because I think it's a very unique tool that you've kind of developed that we can share with others, but also to keep it going until we can actually have some classes there.
Yeah, so last spring, right as the pandemic was hitting, knowing how impactful the materials that our Community Listens had put together were, I reached out to our local expert, Dr. Terry Varner, who is an associate professor of communication. She's the one who teaches the listening skills class on our campus. And without her, John Gardner doesn't know who we are. Yeah. And without John Gardner, I don't know our Community Listens. So Dr. Varner is a key figure in this whole evolution of our relationship with our Community Listens. you referenced me being a professor of environmental science and physics. I have to say, working with Dr. Varner is a real honor and privilege for me. And I feel like a bit of a pretender when I'm trying to teach about listening, because she's the real expert on this campus. But we applied to be a partner last April, and I worked with Dr. Varner and our Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Lisa Kirkpatrick, on a proposal that would allow us to bring that 3-day workshop to our campus so that we could offer it to students, faculty, staff, alumni, neighbors, and friends of St. Edward's University. And our proposal was accepted, and we were kind of in the planning stages last spring, and we realized that as the summer went on and the cases of COVID weren't going down, it was not going to be possible for us to offer the in-person 3-day workshop during the fall semester. But we wanted to do something. And Dr. Varner is also a member of the International Listening Association. And I joined after Dr. Varner and I were connected. And they each September celebrate an International Day of Listening. And,
oh, wow.
and
Wonderful.
yeah, and that made for the perfect day is September 17th. It was the perfect day for us to try to kick off something related to listening. And we were brainstorming, trying to think, what do we want to do? And I got this idea to try to reproduce a book club model, but to use the fabulous podcasts that Our Community Listens has produced and that Adam has done the interviews for years. I've listened to them. They're amazing, great reflections on the content, a real fun way to either learn it for the first time, to be inspired by it, or to reflect back and review the stuff that you took in the workshop. And I thought, well, let's go look at all these podcasts and we'll organize them by topic. And I decided that that first one on September 17th would be about empathy and listening. And so we took that subject matter. We got three of the podcasts. We used Welcome to the OCL podcast so that people knew what this was all about. And then want to help someone? Listen to them. And then the third one we used was Empathy is Empowering. And we had the participants listen to those. We had about 60 people register. We had about 30 people actually attend the event. So pretty good turnout. And we spent the hour together reflecting on the content and used the great Zoom breakout room feature to distribute folks into groups of 3 to talk about listening and to listen to one another. And it was a powerful experience for everyone who participated.
Such a cool event. Go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. How many people on campus have taken the 3-day course? And excuse my ignorance, I just don't have your background. So is it just you at this point?
I think I'm the only one on campus who's taken the 3-day workshop at this point.
Do you have
we had
plans?
everything planned and then the pandemic hit.
Gotcha.
And it has continually stalled. But one of the great things that Gary has done was calling us up and say, hey, I have this idea. Is it okay if? And we're like, yeah. What's neat is this Friday, this week, he'll be meeting with our partners in OCL, and not all of them are educational partners. We got folks in the military, cities, different organizations, different nonprofits, to talk about how they can take his idea built around what Adam's developed. Adam didn't even know this was taking place with where he started with the podcasts and say, hey, you could be totally doing this in your community and I'll help. So it's kind of taking the idea of the nonprofit world and how can we share and build and support each other. And Gary's kind of like paying it forward, not just with OCL, but with organizations that we work with as well too, because imagine if another group takes this and then they come up with the next best idea and the next best idea. And that's really what we're about, right? That's what I love about everything that you've done and kind of focused on that as well too. So we'll get them to the 3-day class, but right now they're still getting
Yeah.
some tools and some structures. The 3-day classes and the end all be all, right? But
Right.
yeah, working through this right now is such an important piece through that. Gary also has played an important role as we're developing and working on an online CST class. Gary was a member of what we called our alpha group to really kind of review material, talk about how it's not really an asynchronistic, but how do we still build human connection and conversation with that. Gary, you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, thank you. Like many organizations that provide educational content, OCL was faced with the challenge of not being able to deliver the in-person experience with the 3-day workshop as well. And so we're all trying to leverage technology to stay connected at some level. And we recognize that it's not the same as being in person, but thank heavens for the technology. I can only imagine where we would have been during this pandemic if this video conferencing technology didn't exist, or the FaceTime, or these tools that we've used to stay connected at some level with one another have been absolutely critical. So one of the things that I think is important going into the development of educational materials, and it was clear as part of the review of the first version of the Our Community Listens class as well, we're not trying to recreate the in-person experience via Zoom or an online format. My analogy was, look at this as your second child. Your first child was that 3-day workshop in-person experience. And your second child is still part of the same family and has the same values, but they have very different personalities and behaviors. And you shouldn't try to make it the same as your first child. It has different objectives, different goals, different talents, different strengths, and different challenges. And so I think if we all sort of embrace that this is going to be a different kind of experience for the folks who partake of it, but still meaningful and impactful, that it can complement what goes on in the in-person workshop, not replace it. It's going to be amazing. And on the really positive side, people from all over the world could be in your class. There's no geographic limitations. There may be somebody may be on the Zoom at 2 a.m. Because they're on the other side of the planet. How cool is that? So I think there's opportunity here to have a kind of learning that actually is impossible in the in-person experience, that will be really neat. We don't know exactly what's going to happen until we do it, but I think it's going to be really positive experience for everyone.
I really wanted to ask you that question, Gary, because you are such an inspiration to the group. Because sometimes, the group gets locked down and I don't know if we can, and this can be really hard. And Gary kept saying, hey, this may be different, but how do we know this part won't be better? Let's rethink this. And he was just that positive inspiration to keep the group and the class going. And I'm really excited we're the beta classes for the first time. And I know, Gary, you were a big part of that as well. So thank you. I got kind of a big ticket question for you, Gary. So we talked about students, we talked about St. Ed's, the tools you've learned along with doing your listening podcasts or your listening club podcasts. How do you support the faculty and staff that is struggling as well to support not just the kids, but keeping the campus going and understanding they may have their own kids at home that they're trying to teach, and just all the weight that they feel? How are you supporting and helping them?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very difficult moment for everyone. And I think folks need a lot of empathy, a lot of space and grace. we need to understand, and this was a realization I had last spring, and I shared with my colleagues as we were just starting to understand more about the pandemic at the end of March and through April as we were closing the semester. Our classes are probably not the most important thing on our students' minds right now. And our students are going to remember a lot more about the way they felt they were treated than they are about the content that you're trying to provide. And I think that's still the case. Hey, we all have our moments. And I will tell you, after 7 months of being in a 1,500 square foot house, which I'm grateful for, close to work, but with 2 small boys and a small yard and no
Yikes.
social interaction, I mean, we're feeling it. We're tired and we're stressed, and I'll lose my cool. And it's not fun. And I recognize, hey, that wasn't right. And daddy needs a reset, you know. I need to listen better and I need to have empathy. And I've told my 9-year-old son, Charlie, a number of times, I can't imagine what my childhood would have been like, how I would have felt at 9, not being able to see my friends. When I was 9, we were out playing wiffle ball in the yard and hot box and basketball and Nerf football. We were outside playing with the neighbor kids every single day. And for me, as Charlie's dad, to say, hey, we can't be playing with the other kids right now because there's this disease. That's tough. So I got to have a lot of empathy, a lot of grace and space for Charlie. He's processing and dealing in his own way. Our students are processing and dealing in their own way. Our faculty, I'm sure, are facing challenges that we don't know about, whether it's family members or friends or social challenges. We're all disconnected and fragmented in a way we've not been before. So we have to listen even better and more attentively than ever, because people have stuff to say about their experience and they're desperate to have someone listen.
Right. So Gary, I'm just interested if you can answer this question, help me understand. How do you imagine incorporating the OCL skills with your students on campus down the road? Is it going to be within your listening class or something extra?
Yeah, so Dr. Varner, I know, has referenced the podcast materials already to students she's teaching this fall. And we hope to be running the 3-day workshop on our campus that we will invite our community to attend, whether they be students or faculty, staff, alumni, friends, eventually community members, because we really do want this to be an experience that impacts eventually all of Austin. And I think personally, I take the skills from this class and try to remember when I'm in class, when I'm working with students, to listen to their stories, to listen to their concerns. You know, one of the great challenges as a faculty member, I mean, we love to teach, which means we love to talk. And, you know, one of the key steps and one of the hardest steps in the reflective listening is silence, and being okay to let some time pass to give people a chance to process and think about it and formulate a response and then listen. You got to get to that uncomfortable moment and then keep your mouth shut so that you can hear them.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, we're really good as teachers to answer our own questions before anyone gets to respond, right? And we find out even in the research that really peers learn best from their peers. So if we can listen, they're going to make connections with each other that sometimes we struggle to make those connections with. And I think that's such a powerful teaching lesson as instructors and facilitators and professors and whatever other titles we may hold in the field of education. Therese and I have talked before, you know, we come from the special education background, and how quick we were often to answer questions because we felt like we had to get through material, right? Rather than really just focus on the learning piece that needed to take place at that moment in time and allow, the kids really to digest the information to be able to
Right.
bring it out as well.
To struggle with it and really understand it and then be able to apply it takes time.
Yeah. And that's that deep learning, and that's the depth of knowledge. That's the Bloom's taxonomy. That's everything we've learned, to become educators. That sometimes the listening piece is the most important piece, just like we learned in class.
Yeah, educators certainly face the tension of, I've got this much material that I have to cover, and I'm supposed to be at this point on this day and on this point on the next day. And we know from experience, including our own experiences, that learning doesn't happen like that. Learning is a struggle. You go through it multiple times, and then you hope at some point you have an aha moment. But that doesn't happen on anybody's clock. It happens for each individual on their own time. So allowing that space and time and figuring out how to weigh that against the need to cover a certain amount of material, I think that's a challenge for all of us as educators. I would also say that as an educator, and I was fortunate to get to go to a Jesuit high school in St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. So Teresa, cheers to my old peeps back there in
Sure.
St. Louis.
Did you go to SLU High?
I did go to SLU High. That's right. And
wonderful. Yeah, great, wonderful school, guys.
Yeah, I rode the Kings Highway bus, lived at Kings Highway in Gravois, took the Kings Highway bus up to St. Louis U High. And, one of the things, their motto was to be a person for others and to be an example for the world. And I think it's a great lesson for educators. And we see this over and over again, too, especially if you've got little kids. They watch what you do, not what you say. And so if we're not modeling this, if we're not showing them that we live it, they're not going to learn it. And I think that's true for our college students and our colleagues as well, that we have to live the way we want them to learn. And so I take a great responsibility in struggling with this material, and it is a struggle, to try to keep it in front of my mind, that when I'm interacting with people, listening has to be my primary objective. And
I bet it's so hard. Excuse me. I
bet
it's so hard with you at home with those two boys. Like you were mentioning earlier, it's probably a very, it's always a learning environment for you to utilize these skills.
Well, and there's always something to listen to. So until they're both asleep, the house is just, screaming and yelling. And that's why I'm at the office to record this, because you wouldn't have any quiet.
You needed a break from listening so you could talk on our podcast. I love that. It's kind of funny when we really think about how difficult just the concept of listening is because as educators, we don't teach listening skills in school, but however, that's one of the primary things teachers want to complain about is, oh, little Joey doesn't listen, or little Timmy doesn't listen. And it's interesting in the pedagogy and everything that you learn, we don't just take time to teach it as a really, really hard skill. And if we did, and we modeled it well, like Gary's saying, because the modeling is the key from the adults, what would it look like? How much better would learning be, right? But then that empathy piece and all those humaning skills, those peopling skills, the life skills we need to have would probably change drastically as well. So yeah, we have a lot of
Change the world.
But we'll get there, right? At least Teresa's going to lead the way.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, on that point, Mike, I'll say that every time our podcast listening club meets, I put up a slide, one of the slides from the 3-day workshop. That's the quote by Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
The most helpful thing a person can do is to listen to others. And I show that slide at the beginning before we have our first breakout. And I say, introduce yourselves to one another in your breakout room, but then reflect on that quote. What would the world look like if the most important thing everyone did for one another was to listen to them?
Listen. The world would be different.
I absolutely, the world would look like a totally different place. We get to the end of our podcast listening club session, and I say, sort of reflect on how you felt today, knowing that someone else was listening to you. And I have a word cloud that forms on the side, so people send in their answers to that question, and we watch as the word cloud fills with feedback from the folks who are participating. And the words that come up on that word cloud are connected, grounded, vulnerable, relatable, appreciated, not alone, honest. And then I close the meeting by going back to that Rogers quote and saying, do we have a sense of what that world would look like now? And wouldn't it be cool if we could spread that around?
Listeners, I want to let you know that there is a upcoming interactive webinar that you can join others across the whole country and world. It's called What is Really Bugging Me?, where we work on identifying specific behaviors and avoiding judgment, and learn why that is crucial if we want to create connection and understanding. These webinars will always take place on the second Thursday, third Tuesday, and fourth Saturday of each month. Be sure to look for more information on our website at ourcommunitylistens.org.
It's been such a great discussion today, Dr. Morris and Teresa. I want to thank you. I wish we could just continue on with this because I'm really enjoying this. However, we do need to bring it to a close. So let's wrap up with some key takeaways that each of us have from today. And Teresa, I'll start with you. And then if you don't mind, Dr. Morris, I'll hand it off to you after Teresa goes. Teresa?
All right. Thank you, Mike. I have two key takeaways. And one, Dr. Morris just mentioned how the 3-day class is just not the end all be all, that we need to continue utilizing the skills, practicing the skills, applying the skills, teaching the skills of our communication classes. So I like that he understands that, and he's going to spread our word further. And then my second key takeaway would be that there's actually a listening association. Thank you for that, Dr. Morris. I'm going to look into that and try to learn more about that association.
Very good, Teresa. Gary, what are your thoughts? What are your key takeaways? Big ideas.
Well, certainly we are living through times that people haven't faced in 100 years. And as we're super fragmented and separated from one another physically, it's more important than ever to be good listeners to those who are near us, who we're still in touch with, our families, and those in our little bubbles, but to a stranger or to a person in a Zoom meeting, to try to use that silence and listen. The other thing I would say is, as difficult as the times are, it's an opportunity and an invitation to rethink some things. The technology is allowing us to do things that were impossible 20 years ago. How can we leverage this time, these tools, to create a new kind of experience that honors the mission and intention of the Our Community Listens materials and gets the word out to more and more people around the world? And I hope that with the initiative that Mike, you described earlier with the online version of the communication class, and for folks who are interested in this podcast model, it's a great time to try some new things, and we'll do our best. And I bet there will be a whole bunch of people grateful that we tried.
I agree. My key takeaway, Gary, is on a word that you said a couple times, and I wrote it down, and it's desperate, right?
Mm.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. And you brought up how people really are desperate to be listened to, and they need someone to be empathetic. And I really like the word desperate because it kind of takes it away from that negative connotation, the negative idea, and says, this is what just people just need. Like if we could give them this gift, and it truly is a gift, we can really do a lot of value to another individual rather than the harm that we see happening over and over and over. And it's really the key. It's the gateway. It's, the arch, whatever you want to call it, to empathy with that listening. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And so I'm gonna start using that word. I'm gonna borrow that from you, if you don't mind, to kind of continue my journey with not just the people around me in OCL, but my teenage daughters as well as we continue to go forward. I want to take this opportunity to thank you both. It's just been a fascinating hour in discussion with each of you. I know you both are very, very in tune to what we're trying to do in the focus, not just in education, but the world. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dr. Morris.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
If you have any suggestions about subjects for our podcast, feel free to reach out through our Facebook page. And if you're interested in taking a class, visit ourcommunitylistens.org. Thank you again for listening to our podcast, and don't forget, each word, each action, each silent moment of listening sends a message. Therefore, you are the message.